All right. Our CCS now in session on.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and set forth our appearances for the record.
Your Honor, Will Kemp, Eric Pepperman, and Teddy Parker for plaintiffs.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joel Odou on behalf of Real Water Inc., InfinityLifestyles.com Inc., and Real Water Gold Coast.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jim Neale, Joan Anderson, and David Spurlock on behalf of UNFW.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jim Kavanaugh for Real Water of Tennessee, LLC.
All right, good morning. Does that cover everyone? Mr. Rasmussen, is he here?
Mr. Rasmussen went to another department, Your Honor. He'll be back.
All right, I just want to make sure we didn't overlook him.
We have Mr. Robbins on, but he.
Okay, tight in that much. Mr. Robbins, you can go ahead and set forth your appearance, sir, and unmute.
Sorry, my button's wasn't working there, Your Honor. Rob Robbins for Milwaukee.
Okay, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And what's up next?
Your Honor, I think number 23 is next, but I understand 25, or which one?
I'll tell you, hold on. So, Your Honor, Mr. Neale and I were able to come to an agreement on two motions. Plaintiff's motion in limine number 25, including the next Marjorie Haley's injury caused by energy drinks. That one, they're withdrawing their opposition to it.
Okay.
Unless we open the door or someone else opens the door, they will not offer such testimony or evidence.
Right, and once again, that's motion in limine for Torah.
25.
Number
Motion on number 25.
Okay, that's granted.
We also reached a similar agreement in terms of plaintiff's motion limine number 39.
Okay.
And that was the motion to include reference to the real water settlement with plaintiff Haley and the Gallagher family on. So unless, I can only imagine that unless plaintiff or real water were to somehow open the door, that would become an issue, but I can't see how otherwise it could ever become an issue.
That's our thinking, Your Honor. Unless some unforeseen event forces us to hit that head on, we agree with the plaintiff's position in the reply and the case law cited there.
Ms. Mercer, do you need the docket numbers for these?
So I think that's all the housekeeping we have.
All right. So that's done, and that's two that can be taken off the list. Well, Mr. Kemp.
Your Honor, so this would be number 23 with regards to Dr. Dara. And specifically, we're focusing on turmeric and just so the court understands what we're talking about. Turmeric is a widely used supplement. I think the last estimate I saw was 12 or 14 Americans a day use turmeric supplements. This is the actual supplement that Mr. Haley was taking that I have in my hand, Your Honor. This is sold at Whole Foods. Sold at Whole Foods today. So this is what's referred to as a gummy bear. This is what, when we reference gummy bears in the testimony that I'm about to show you,
Right.
This is what they're talking about. This is one gummy bear. So that's turmeric. Kratom is a powdery substance that Mr. Belsky put in tea. And so he was drinking what's referred to as kratom tea. And kratom is often described as having an opioid-like effect. That doesn't mean it's bad because chocolate has an opioid-like effect. That just means it acts on the same receptors that opioids act on. So the thought process here, and the people who use kratom tea, is that it soothes them, kind of relaxes them, gives them some clarity. I've never tried it, but a lot of people do use it. So those are the two substances we're talking about, kratom and turmeric. And our position is basically that there's no science that supports the proposition that either one of those substances causes acute liver injury. So let's start out with Dr. Dara's opinion. Dr. Dara is a board-certified gastroenterologist and also a liver specialist that works down in California at USC. And she is UNF's causation expert with regards to this. And, you know, we think the problem, and we'll get into it, is that she's just given us a laundry list of potential causes. Let's pop up Dara 18:2 through 19, please.
There we go.
Okay, and what is the most likely cause in your report? And I think we're talking about, yeah, I'm talking about Mr. Haley here. Question, and what is the next most likely cause of the report? So he's using a lot of herbal and dietary supplements. It's difficult to kind of break him at this point because he was using all of them at the same time. But I consider the most likely, the most common cause of liver injury from supplements is green tea. That's out, Your Honor. Just to recall that. And as I pointed out, he consumed a lot of green tea extract. He also consumed ashwagandha, which has been associated, like I said, let's go slowly. Pretty quickly wrong. So number one is turmeric, number two is green tea extract, and the third is what? Ashwagandha, okay. And there are other so he has a EBV, CNE, HSV, so she says they're not ruled out. I have 21.9 through 22.5, please. All right, so after we've beaten through it a little bit, we have 5 things left. Turmeric, green tea, ashwagandha, unknown viruses, and real water. And she rules out real water, just like she rules out like yellow bar. So we're really left with 4 here. Again, this is Mr. Haley. Turmeric, the gummy bears, green tea, ashwagandha, and viruses. And out of these 4, which is the most likely? So she says turmeric is most likely. And what's number 2? And she goes, I'm not 100% sure. Let's go to the next page, Chris, 1 through 5. So real water is 5. She rules out real water, doesn't consider that as a potential cause. Okay. So let's go to Mr. Belsky. That's Mr. Haley. Belsky, 25, 1 through 17. So Mr. Belsky's case, we have 1 Tylenol, 2 viruses, 3 is the kratom that I've just talked about, and then recent antibiotic root use. And she says she's considered real water. She rules it out because her usage is adequate to drink enough of it. So she has 5. Tylenol, viruses, kratom, antibiotics, and raw water. And she thinks real water is less likely, but she considered it in Mr. Belsky's case, not in Mr. Haley's case. And the reason she considered the Belsky case is because, in her view, there's more usage because he's a home delivery person. All right, Chris, so that would be 1 through 17. Let's 29, 6 through 38. Okay. Now we're trying to get to reasonable probability. So, the problem we had in the deposition, or one of the problems, I guess I should say, is, we got into this could have been stuff. So I'm asking her, instead of telling me what could have been, can you tell me to a reasonable degree of medical probability that Tylenol was the cause? And so her answer is, I have an opinion, and we get a little lower, Chris. I have an opinion that kratom, antibiotics, and Tylenol to a reasonable degree of medical certainty are more likely the cause of his liver injury than real water. So he's got 3 things, and so I tried to boil in on the Tylenol a little bit. Water, antibiotics, and usually medical certainty are more likely than real water. So I think what we have here is an opinion whether she's ranking causes, kind of like exactly like the expert did in the Morsicata case. Next one, please, 32.8 through 33.10. Okay, Tylenol. Try one more time on Tylenol. Is that, to a reasonable degree of medical probability, the cause of Mr. Belsky's case? So now she's got to choose between her top 3 differentials. So she's got kratom, antibiotics neck and neck with kratom, and we're not challenging the science on either Tylenol or antibiotics, Your Honor. We're just challenging on kratom and turmeric. So to reasonably medical certainty the cause of his liver injury is kratom, antibiotics followed by Tylenol. And so I'm trying to explain what a reasonable degree of medical certainty is to her. That's got to be over 50%, right? And continue non-Chris to 3310 there. So you can't have 3 different types of things over 50%. I mean, I'm trying to explain this to her. If one's over 50%, fine, tell me. If you don't, if it's 1/3, 1/3, tell me. So reasonable medical probability is kratom, in your opinion. And now she says, again, it's more likely to be kratom or antibiotics than it is real water. Kind of frustrating here, Your Honor. 34.7 through 34.19. Try one more time. The reason we agree with medical probability, kratom or antibiotics, both are more likely than real water. Both are over 50%. So I asked her, well, how can both be over 50%? Because that total is over 100%. And, she gives her answer again. I think maybe Dr. Dara doesn't really fully understand what reasonable degree of medical certainty means. I think that's beside the point for this motion. 78, 9 through 12. Now we're asking her, okay, how likely is it that you can get a liver injury if you're using kratom? So 200,000 to 100,000 to 1, okay, in general. I mean, that is pretty high odds, Your Honor. Later, she reduces that a little bit. Let's go to 8110 through 18. She tries to back it down to 5,000 to 1. And I point out to her that the odds ratio for the Southern Nevada Health District, if you use real water, and we talked about before, is 31 to 1. Okay, so she starts off at 100,000 to 200,000 to 1, changes it to 5,000 to 1. Let's see the next one, 147, 5 through 10. Try to go through the same exercise on turmeric. So turmeric, we wind up at 5 through 10 there. So rare event, 200,000 to 1. And this is where we start introducing this term idiosyncratic. Okay? So what idiosyncratic appears to mean is that out of all the 5 billion people on the planet, someone could have a bad reaction to this drug. So I don't need science. I don't need animal studies. I don't need in vivo studies. I don't need clinical studies. I don't need case studies. I can just say it's idiosyncratic and call it a cause. Okay, but anyway, so 200,000 to 1 for turmeric. And, that's pretty reasonable. Assuming turmeric does cause liver injury, 200,000 to 1, pretty high odds, Your Honor. Now we get to where I really think she's going over the top here. 92, 12 through 14. 1 cup of tea is enough to cause acute liver injury. Now, Mr. Belsky was drinking more than 1 cup, but we're just trying to boil down the dose here. 1 cup of tea, she says, is enough to cause acute liver injury. And when we get to the science, this is just so far out there, all right? Let's take a look at the next one. One gummy bear can cause acute liver injury. 1 gummy bear supposedly can put a 30-year-old man into the hospital for 5 days with acute liver failure, and the doctors are telling him he has to have a liver transplant from 1 gummy bear. Your Honor, here's 1 gummy bear. let's see what happens. Back to the argument. Okay, later on we have a Williams challenge to this opinion, but right now we're just focusing on the science. So, moving to the case law, an opinion regarding an alternative cause must be based upon competent science, proving that the blamed substance indeed is a cause of agent. That's straight out of Hallmark. Here we have animal studies, in vivo studies, clinical studies, one by the FDA, all showing that turmeric is safe and effective. And with regards to kratom, we have clinical studies, in vivo studies, and animal studies, all showing it's safe and effective. We don't have one single study, not one, on either one of these substances that shows that either causes acute liver injury. So let's go through, let's start with the world's leading expert on turmeric, Dr. Singh. And the reason that Dr. Dara even recognized him as an authority, she cited this exact same book chapter in her rebuttal report. So let's start out with Dr. Singh. Can I have the golden spice? So this is Dr. Singh. Start out with turmeric. I'm going to go to kratom. Let's go to turmeric. So again, this is Dr. Singh's book chapter on turmeric. Can you pop that up so the judge can see the title of the chapter? Turmeric, the golden spice. And the author, please, Chris. Show the author. That's Dr. Prasad, Prasad. So, basically he starts out by saying that turmeric is used as a spice, and it's a household remedy. It's been known to be safe for centuries. And he says, quote, to date, no studies in either animals or humans have discovered any toxic effects associated with the use of turmeric. Turning to turmeric, go to the next one, please, Chris. We start out with the animal study by this is Dr. Miyakoshi. I think this is an in vivo study. So Dr. Miyakoshi does an in vivo study of turmeric, and he finds not only does it not hurt the liver, but it protects the liver. It's hepatoprotective. So this is the first study, the in vivo study. And then later on he talks about some other studies there. Go back up there, Chris. You got the next doctor. No, back to right where you were. The next sentence now. Yeah, so we have Dr. Deshpanda's study here. Again, I think this is an in vivo study. And now we're starting to get into the animal studies. I mean, turmeric's been tested on rats, on mice. I don't think they did guinea pigs, but all the animal tests show that turmeric is safe and effective. Okay? So, next one, Chris. This is the section of Dr. Singh's book chapter about safety and contraindications. Safe for centuries. To date, no studies in either animals or humans have discovered any toxic effects associated with turmeric. That's Dr. Lau's paper, which I think we're going to show in a minute, from 2006. And it's clear that turmeric is not even toxic in high doses. The FDA itself did a clinical study, a number of clinical studies on turmeric, and published a 300-page monograph. And they declared that turmeric, the active component, which is curcumin, is generally regarded as safe. So, I mean, turmeric's used in lots of things, Your Honor. Mustard, cereals, chips, cheese, butter, other products. I mean, it's a very widely used substance. So now we have another clinical study on turmeric by Dr. Joshi, 2003. Again, finds it to be safe and effective. Next one, Chris. Oh, is that the end of this one?
For Golden Space.
Yeah. That's the end of the Golden Space. So, Your Honor, when all is said and done, there are 6 different clinical studies, including one by the FDA. So we have in vivo studies, animal studies, and clinical studies, all showing that turmeric's safe and effective, including the FDA study. All right. So we confronted Dr. Dara with this. And first of all, she conceded that Dr. Prasad, the one I've been reading from, can I have Dara 114, 5 through 16? Okay. Talk about the fact, she cites Dr. Prasad in the rebuttal report, because, I mean, you can't write a report on turmeric without citing the world's leading authority. But she cites him, remembers reading the paper, and then I go through each one of the studies with her. So we start with the in vivo study. Let's go to 118.20 through 119.1. We're talking about the fact that it's antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-mutagenic, antimicrobial, anti-cancer. There's actually 10 to 15 recent papers saying that it's good for COVID. So I'm asking, did I read that right? She says it's basically she says it's an antioxidant after we boiled, they call it a potent antioxidant. She agrees with that. All right? And let's go to 119.1. That's the next page. So she admits right there that the in vivo study shows that turmeric is safe and effective. Now we go to the hepatoprotective one I showed you. So I asked her, well, here's Dr. Singh and Dr. Miyakoshi saying it's hepatoprotective. All right, 120.20 through 121.1. I show her these papers, and she says, well, one more to get 18. Okay, and according to this author, turmeric has a hepatoprotective effect. That's Dr. Miyakoshi. And I go, and she goes, yeah, I know that people believe that. And she goes, yeah, Dr. Miyakoshi wrote a paper in 2004. And then she says, oh, well, the Indians believe that. I mean, the Indians believe that? So they're dismissing scientific literature because it's written by someone that happens to be from the country of India? I mean, that's, and she said this a couple times, Your Honor. Well, let's go to 122, 7 through 23. We go through all this about their proponents of, that's an Eastern medicine, Your Honor. I think it's Ayurvedic, but anyway. So, Prasad's an Indian, okay? Miyakoshi's an Indian. So we're going to disregard, all of a sudden we're going to disregard the world's leading authority on turmeric that she cited in her rebuttal report, and we're going to disregard Dr. Miyakoshi because they're Indians. Now, that's a novel approach. I've never seen an expert try to dismiss literature that disproves her position or his position based upon the nationality of the author. I mean, that is a very unique position. I don't know if that's supported by any case law, at least none I know of. But, I mean, on top of that, it's wrong, Your Honor. Dr. Miyakoshi is Japanese. He's from the University of Hiroshima in Japan. He's published 45 or 50 papers. I mean, for her to say, oh, I'm not going to go with Dr. Miyakoshi because he's an Indian. But the bottom line here, I think, is that there are in vivo studies that prove that turmeric is safe and effective. All right, then we went to the animal studies, and we dragged Dr. Dara through the animal studies. Let's see 127 through 15. All right, so I confront her that, the turmeric's safe and effective in the animal models, and she says that's true because she looked at some of the animal studies. Next one, Chris, 125, 8 through 24. But now she starts telling me that animal studies aren't relevant, okay? Forget animal studies because I'm talking about an idiosyncratic drug reaction. That means if, one person on the whole planet can get a bad reaction to turmeric, I don't have to have studies. I don't have to have anything. I have nothing. I don't need anything. So that's how she starts dismissing the animal studies. The next, 126, 8 through 19. I think you already had that up there, Chris. So she dismisses Dr. Deshpande's study on mice. Forget that. The next study, the animal study on rats, she dismisses. It's not relevant. Okay? It's not relevant to her. So 127, 11 through 16. 5 different animal studies showing that turmeric is safe and effective. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5. All right? She dismisses every one of them. Every single one of them. And 128, 4, is that 128, 4 through 16? Yeah, 128, 4 through 16. Okay. She didn't even read these papers, Your Honor, at least some of them. So when we confront them with her, she says, doesn't matter to me. Let's go to the 6 clinical studies. I think we got them on the motion to eliminate, number 23, page 3, 7 through 10, Chris. Okay. So we got Dr. Palasa, we have the FDA one. I'm going to show you the other 4 in a couple minutes. So he said, Dr. Dar, did you even look at the FDA clinical study before you rendered an opinion? 134 through 24. No, 130 of Dr. Darrow. 424, I'm sorry. Okay. Talking about Dr. Prasad. So she takes this paper by Dr. Ahmad that's about 10 clinical studies that discusses a theoretical association between certain kinds of turmeric and acute liver injury. And I'm going to get to that paper, Your Honor, because amazingly, that paper supports my position in this case. But in any event, she's saying here that she will take this paper over an FDA clinical study. Now remember, she dismissed all the animal studies because animals aren't people. Now I'm showing her clinical studies on people, and she's dismissing those because those aren't relevant because this is idiosyncratic. The bottom line here is they have no science whatsoever to support their position. The only paper they cite is this paper by Dr. Ahmad that I call the growing problem paper because that's in the title. Can I have that one, Chris? So here's what they cite. And you know, they were pretty sneaky in the opposition. They cited this paper 5 different times. And wait a page, cited, wait a page, cited, wait a page, cited, trying to create a false impression that there was lots of literature out there. There's not. There's this, and I call this Dr. Ahmad's paper. He's technically not the first author. But, let's see him on there. But in any event, this is the paper she cites. Okay? And this paper discusses 10 different liver injury cases over a period, I think 16 years, that they found in the drug-induced liver injury network that they think are idiosyncratic. Okay? 10 over a 16-year period. So they are propounding the theory that maybe turmeric can potentially cause severe liver injury. Okay? That's the conclusion. Turmeric causes potentially severe liver injury. It's stated a little differently later on in the paper, but this is what they rely on. Now let's take a look at what this paper actually says. First of all, on the clinical studies, Chris, can I have the first section paper? This paper specifically says the clinical trials have not shown toxic effects and that it's reported to be safe orally at the dose of 6 grams per day for 4 to 6 weeks. I think 6 grams a day would be 2 of these, two bottles. 6 grams a day is a lot of gummy bears, Your Honor. So this is what their paper says, that the clinical trials, and they cite 7 through 10. Can we flip over to 7 through 10, Chris? Footnotes? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. So this is Dr. Baum's study, Dr. Ringman's study. I think that's Agawali and another doctor. I don't want to try that one. But so these are 4 more clinical studies showing that turmeric is safe and effective. You know, in general, they're trying turmeric to cure a number of different things. You know, they're trying it on Alzheimer's disease. They're trying it on some kind of knee injury. They're trying it on, you know, all kinds of things. But in the course of the studies, they all find it safe and effective. So now we have 6 different clinical studies. We have their paper that says all the clinical studies and all the animal studies. And then their paper says conceivably, because we've seen these 10 cases over 16 years, conceivably that at the conclusion, Chris, from the text there, yeah, conceivably the enhanced veil building could potentiate liver injury. So what are they saying here? They are saying that in the last, I don't know, let's say 10 or 15 years, some of the manufacturers are putting black pepper into the turmeric supplements. And the reason they're doing black pepper is they think that increases the absorbability of the turmeric, so you get more bang for your buck. So they're saying conceivably this black pepper could increase absorption. Well, there's no in vivo studies on this. There's no animal studies on this. There's no clinical studies on this. All there is this one paper where they speculate this after they say that the clinical trials have not shown toxic effects. And that is the slender reed upon which this opinion is based, Your Honor. So our position is pretty simple. We don't think this meets the standards of Hallmark to allow an expert to come on and say that a turmeric is the cause in this case. And, you know, I could get into a little bit more on these 10 patients. You know, Mr. Parker's dug into this like, you know, a dog that hasn't had a bone in 3 weeks. You know, he's into this paper like you can't believe. But these 10 people, first of all, I can't remember, but the majority, I think 8 of them were women. and they test them all, and they found out they had some genetic predisposition. 6 of them were alcoholics, and so, they're blaming the liver injury on turmeric and not the alcohol, potentially. So, Mr. Haley, first of all, he's not a woman. Second of all, they haven't done any genetic testing on him to show he has this genetic predisposition. And I said to Dr. Dara, well, why don't you do genetic testing on Mr. Haley? And she goes, oh, not necessary, just going to apply my opinion here. So that's where we're left with, Your Honor. Now, moving to Kratom. Kratom has not been studied extensively as turmeric. So let's see what we have here, Chris. Let's go to Dr. Dara, 96 through 11 through 4. We have some in vivo studies, but I'm going to jump right to the animal studies. So Dr. Henningfield, he wrote a paper for the Kratom lobby group or whatever it's called, Kratom Users of America, or something like that. And so I refer to Dr. Henningfield's paper where he gathered all the literature.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Yeah. The mistake on the record was 8 were using alcohol and 36.
Oh, yeah, 8 out of the 10 were using alcohol, Your Honor, in the study that I referred to as the Ahmad study. In Mr. Haley's case, where they're trying to use this turmeric on, there's no indication that he's an alcoholic or excessively uses alcohol, and they haven't rendered that opinion. All right, so here are the animal studies. So we're looking at the animal studies on kratom. And so kratom, the animal studies show it to be safe and effective. And so let's go to her deposition. I asked her, well, are there any animal studies that support your position that kratom can cause acute liver failure? And 96, 11 through 14. Okay, so the only ones, is it? Okay, 11 through 14. Okay, so the only 2 animal studies, she doesn't have any other than the 2 that support the proposition that kratom is safe and effective. And then we ask if there's any animal studies that show direct toxicity on kratom. Let's go 89, 12 through 22, Chris. Just trying to find the science that supports this opinion, Your Honor. Okay, so he says that they do not study idiosyncratic toxicity. We're back to that, Your Honor. Even though I don't have any studies, it's theoretically possible that, I don't know how many people we got in the world now, 7 billion, 8 billion, that 1 out of these 7 billion people would have a bad reaction to kratom. Theoretically possible. So we don't need studies, okay? So again, she says they're not humans, they're animals, they don't have the same genome as humans. So she dismisses the animal studies once again. So we talk about the clinical studies supporting the position that kratom causes liver injury. So let's go to 92, 13 through 18. So, not aware of any studies. Okay, I'm going to get to the recent study in a second, but she's not aware of any studies that support her proposition, and we haven't found any, Your Honor. All right, let's go to the next one. I think we have Dr. Atchison sneaking in here when we have insight. Do you have that, Chris? Okay, yeah, great. 120 through 23. Dr. Atchison is another one of their experts. So I'm confronting him with the Beagle study on kratom, showing that it's safe and effective, no adverse events. He doesn't care, Can't give you an opinion. I didn't look at any. He didn't look at any animal studies. Kind of like Dr. Dara. Let's go to the next one, Chris. I think it's on the bottom there. Still with Atchison, where he talks about Dr. Harani's study. Next page. Yeah, so I'm asking him, how is it that you can say kratom causes acute liver injury when there's no animal studies, no clinical studies? How is it? Okay? And so he's trying to give me this line that doctors know, all right? I'm a doctor, I know. So finally we get to the paper that they rely on. They have one paper that they rely on for kratom. This is a 2021 paper by Dr. Odou. I think he's French. You have that up, Chris? All right. This is really an interesting thing. There's Dr. Odou right in the front. Okay, so this is the Odou paper. So first of all, where is this paper published? I had never heard of a journal called Curious, C-U-R-E-U-S, good title. I've heard of New England Journal of Medicine, I've heard of Lancet, I've heard of the American Journal of Gastroenterology, I've heard of a lot of different publications, but I've never heard of Curious. So we did a little research on Curious, Your Honor. Curious is an online journal. They do not do peer review before they publish. They do peer review after the fact. So basically, whatever you submit to them is published, and then they have commentary after the fact, which is a really unique approach. I mean, you know, when you put a paper in something like Lancet or New England Journal of Medicine, you've got a 6 to 9 month review process.
Absolutely.
They send it to the editor. It goes back and forth and back and
I
forth.
understand how it works, Mr.
Yeah. All right. Curious doesn't do that. And so, you know, we did a little research, and the editor of Curious, whose name was up there, he says that his approach is better because it stimulates discussion, blah, blah, blah. This is not a reputable scientific piece of literature, Your It's not in a reputable journal. It shouldn't even be considered. That's our first point. And in the brief, we talk about when the Gallagher case came back to the Ninth Circuit on remand. They took a look, because the United States Supreme Court decided Gallagher, so they sent it back to the Ninth Circuit. In the Ninth Circuit, there's a quote in there we have that you have to have peer-reviewed publication. You at least have to have that, okay? Maybe you can be in the lower tier of peer-reviewed publications, but you got to have some kind of peer review. You can't just have an online journal. All right, so this is what they rely on, this Curious publication. Only paper they've got. This is it. Nothing else, okay? So I go through the Curious paper. Let's go through that a little bit, Chris. So Curious is nothing more than a case report. It talks about 2 patients, and it talks about the potential that it was caused by kratom. All right, keep going. So the first one's a 27-year-old guy. You know, look at these ALT, AST readings, Your Honor. 345, 404. I mean, these are moderately high, okay? I mean, I'm not suggesting that doesn't show a problem. But like the Gallagher baby had 5,000 when they rushed that baby up to Salt Lake. So he's associating this kratom with those particular elevated liver enzyme tests. Then we talk about the 37-year-old, 36-year-old woman. Hey, go up, Chris. Let's see the discussion. Down, I mean. Okay, so they're reviewing cases. Quote, although the hepatotoxicity of kratom has been suggested, he's just saying it's possible. It's unclear to what extent any byproducts or contaminants may have a role in liver injury. This is the science they are bringing to the court to say that they meet with the hallmark standard. So they talk about literature, talk about the case reports, says that there's a likely explanation. You know, this is not a scientific paper that can be relied upon to support their proposition. And at the very end, what does he say? Let's go to the very end. He says, these cases contributes to the growing body of evidence supporting kratom as a cause of liver injury. Okay, they're seeing a potential marker. They're investigating it. That's what he's talking about. This does not establish that kratom causes liver injury. So that's their paper, Your Honor. Let's take a look at our paper. Okay, Dr. Singh, can you pop that up, Chris? So this is a 2021 paper by Dr. Singh. This is a very interesting study. So what he did is he's in Malaysia, so pop the abstract up. So he took 13 regular kratom users that have been using kratom for 20 years, and he studied them. And on top of studying them, he gave them liver function tests. In each and every one of the 16 liver function tests. Can you go down a little bit more, Chris? Okay, let's go to his. So make that go up and go down to the paper. Okay. So he's talking about the paper. Let's find the liver function test. I think right there, the hematological blood findings. Up. Okay. Right there. No alterations. Once a week, he gave these 16 people, I think this test lasted 3 or 4 months, he gave them liver function tests. I don't know if you could get away with that here in the United States, but this is what he did. No problems. No alterations whatsoever. And these are long-term kratom users who are using it for 20 years. So this paper, I really think does it all on kratom. So let's look at the last piece of evidence that UNF relies upon. Let's have the Gottlieb letter, please. This is a letter written by the FDA commissioner at the time, Dr. Gottlieb, in 2018. So he's talking about kratom with regards to opioids and the potential for abuse. So first of all, this is a letter from the FDA commissioner. It's not science. It doesn't refer to any animal studies, clinical studies, in vivo studies. Second of all, he's talking about a completely different problem, opioid abuse. You know, this is not a case where Mr. Haley is a drug addict, or excuse me, Mr. Belsky, I guess in this case, is a drug addict. We're trying to determine out which drug is causing this problem. Okay? This is a case about liver failure. So what they do is they wave this letter around, and the deceptive editing in their brief where they quote this letter and they say FDA is concerned about kratom, FDA has highlighted it as a public health risk, FDA this, and then they cut right away to talk about acute liver injury when that's not what this is focused on. It's focused on opioids. So this is not science, Your Honor. It's not even addressing the issue of concern, and we don't think it supports the position that they have adopted. Now, the final excuse is, Judge, we just can't do clinical studies because that would be unethical. It would be unethical to feed one more American turmeric when only 12 million are taking it every day. That's unethical. We can't do that. We can't do clinical studies. That's what they actually say. Can I have that, Chris? It's from their motion to eliminate. Do you have their motion to eliminate?
Their opposition.
Yeah, their opposition. I'm sorry. Page 15, note 3. So, plaintiff's contention regarding the lack of clinical studies showing liver injuries from turmeric or kratom is a complete red herring. It would, of course, be unethical to conduct clinical studies aimed at demonstrating the injurious effects of a known hepatotoxin. Indeed, there are also no prospective clinical studies showing liver injury from real water. Okay? So let's take unethical to conduct clinical studies on turmeric and kratom. Your Honor, I already showed you the FDA study on turmeric that the unethical FDA conducted, showing that turmeric was safe and effective. I showed you the 5 other clinical studies, all approved by the FDA, which showed that turmeric was safe and effective. And we went through the kratom study. Like I already said, I don't know if you could get away with that in the United States. Our standards are pretty strict on clinical studies, but this is not an excuse, okay? So Hallmark doesn't say, oh, you have to have science that supports your proposition on cause, except in cases that it's unethical to have science. There's no exception in Hallmark. And this is such a weak excuse, given the 6 clinical studies I've shown you. So, Your Honor, based on all that, we would submit that there is no science that supports the proposition that turmeric causes acute liver injury. There is no science that supports the proposition that kratom causes acute liver injury. So Dr. Dara should not be able to come to the stand and give this opinion that, oh, it's idiosyncratic, 1 out of 7 billion people could potentially get it, so that's my opinion. You know, there's no science for that either. I mean, so for those reasons, we would respectfully request that this motion be granted. And the motion is a little broader than just Dr. Dara, because some of the other experts have jumped on her opinion. Dr. Hull, for example, says, I agree with Dr. Dara on turmeric and kratom. I mean, turmeric and kratom should both be out, just like green tea is now out. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, ma'am.
I assure you, I'm going to show you plenty of medical literature, peer-reviewed, that supports these theories. But first, because we're talking about liver injury, and I think this is the first motion that's talked about medical causation in these 2 cases. So just a little bit of background. As Mr. Kemp said, Dr. Dara is a leading authority on drug-induced liver injury. Sometimes it's referred to as DILI, so if I use that term, that's what I mean. So she diagnoses drug-induced liver injury for a living. She explained thoroughly in her deposition how she comes to a conclusion. John, if we can pull up page 16 and 17 of Dr. Dara's deposition. Starting at 16, line 23. Okay, that's fine. I'll read it to you.
I know I can wait for it. You don't have it?
I have a picture, I can't pull it up.
Okay,
Because I'd like to see it.
sure.
What were the page and lines?
Page 16, line 23 through 17, line 22. So she's talking about how she comes to her conclusions based on a differential diagnosis. And what she did here was exactly the same as what she would do for each of her patients at USC.
But is this the deposition testimony?
Yes, yes, Your Honor. No, this is the testimony.
Oh, okay. This is from the counter? Not the written transcript. I'm trying to figure out what's to the left.
This is from the synced video, Your Honor. I'll get the transcript so that the next time we pull it up, we have that too.
And I have
But it's verbatim.
a printed copy if Your Honor would prefer it.
No, you can go through it. I
Okay.
mean, if you can give me a printed copy, I'll look at it. But
Okay, well, this is the testimony. So she's talking about how she goes through a full workup and she considers all causes that could possibly cause liver injury, and she decides what she can and cannot rule out. And she did that for both Haley and Belsky, and we'll show you that. But ultimately, what plaintiff's motion comes down to is a suggestion that because there are so few reported cases of liver injury caused by turmeric or kratom, that must mean neither of those could have caused liver injury for Mr. Belsky or Mr. Haley. But Dr. Dara tried to explain this multiple times during your deposition, and it's explained in the literature that I'm going to show you. And Mr. Kemp is right. This comes down to whether a toxin is a direct toxin or an idiosyncratic toxin, which, if given the chance, Dr. Dara will be able to explain to the jury. Now, a direct toxin, I'm just providing some background. A direct toxin is one with a predictable dose response. So acetaminophen is a good example. You take enough Tylenol, you're going to hurt your liver. It may vary the amount slightly based on individual propensities, but it's going to happen. We've been talking in this case a lot about hydrazine and how much hydrazine is required to cause liver injury. In fact, Dr. Kosnet, plaintiff's expert, did a whole analysis of how much. That's because it's a direct toxin. You get a certain amount, you're going to get liver injury. This is different from an idiosyncratic cause of liver injury. And I guess an idiosyncratic response could be thought of like an allergy. So it's not dose dependent. You could give 10,000 people a substance, maybe only one of them will get the liver injury. But that doesn't make the substance any less likely the cause of injury in that person. So for example, I was looking up what might be a 1 in 10,000, and a penicillin injury or allergy is one of them. You get an allergic reaction.
if it's 1 in 10,000, you can't bring that up as a potential alternative cause. That's speculative.
No, it's not. I'm going to show you literature.
Yeah, no, it is. So we under Nevada, it has to be more likely true than not. A 50% chance. And so for example, there's been testimony 1 in 200,000.
That was Mr. Kemp's testimony. But
I mean, no,
she says.
Don't argue with me, but you're saying 1 in 200,000, that's sufficient for a causation opinion?
She offered her opinion that turmeric caused Mr. Haley's injury to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. That's on pages 22 and 23.
Here's the thing, and I understand what that means, and it's actually not to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, it's probability. It's more likely true than not.
I'm reading Mr. Kemp's question.
I'm just telling you what it says. I don't care if she says that, because what we're having here is a hallmark challenge based upon what is the support for opinion. And if somebody's given an opinion that said, I think this is a cause, but I think it's 1 in 200,000. The chances of that being a cause. That's speculative.
That's not what she said. She said in Mr. Haley's case, she believes that it's the cause to a
that
reasonable
says
degree of medical probability.
Wait. I'm just telling you, and it's really this simple. Hallmark stands for a lot. And I understand Hallmark. I understand the qualifications requirement. I understand the assistance requirement. Just as important, I understand the limited and scope requirement under Hallmark. Let's get back to the assistance requirement. If she's going to give an opinion, and I think this is why the Nevada Supreme Court and Justice Gibbons went in the direction they went in. They said, look, a doctor can give an opinion, but it better be peer-reviewed, it better be tested and testable. And that's what they said. And it has to be from an accepted journal, right? Or a university study or something like that. And my point is this, 1 in 200,000, that's probably the chances of getting struck by lightning, darn near. And so if that's somebody's opinion as to alternative causation, why is that not speculation?
I will show you. John, can we pull up the 2023 American Journal of Medicine article?
Judge, this wasn't cited in their opposition, but
This was attached to her report. So this is so basically, because some of these liver injuries are so rare, the National Institutes of Health formed the Drug-Induced Liver Injury Network to examine causes of idiosyncratic liver injury. And so there are 6 medical centers that participate, and it's an effort coordinated by NIH to understand these rare causes. And if you go to the methods section, I believe it's on page 2, John. Yeah, materials and methods. You highlight that. So this is science. There's an observational study, there's design and inclusion criteria, and there's eligibility criteria. And it's listed very clearly here how they came to their conclusions of what study participants to be included. And if you go to the top of the second column, John, please. And what they set up a standardized protocol, and they graded causality as either definite, highly likely, probable, possible, or unlikely. And they only included cases where they had confidence that it was at least probable. And that's how they got their study about the causal relationship between turmeric and idiosyncratic liver injury. And if you go to page 3, John, results, yeah, that first paragraph. And so we hear that there are these millions of people taking turmeric and there's only 10 or 11 cases. But here's what the denominator is, Your Honor. There's 10 or 11 cases among the 1,798 total causality assessments. And that's what we're really looking at here. So it comes to a conclusion that there are a percentage of these people who are getting liver injury from turmeric supplements, which is a good point that, if I may, I can come back to, because the literature cited by plaintiffs involves turmeric used in cooking, not the supplement form. And there's a big difference there. But generally, and John, if you could pull up the 2021 case reports in hepatology, also a peer-reviewed journal.
We go back to that.
Sure.
All right. You can go on, ma'am.
Sure. The 2021 case reports, and on the bottom of page 1, the introduction, I'm sorry, John. And so here's another peer-reviewed journal. Idiosyncratic drug-induced liver injury is estimated to occur in 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 100,000 people who take a medication. That's what it says. That's what the peer-reviewed literature says. That doesn't mean it's not causation in those cases. And that's exactly what Dr. Dara said in her deposition. And the literature produced based upon the data in the Drug-Induced Liver Injury Network, it's peer-reviewed. Yeah, it's a retrospective look at cases, but that's the same thing that they did with the Real Water review. And to the extent that the complaint is that there's no prospective cases of prospective studies, there's 2 reasons in terms of turmeric and kratom. The first is that usually when you have clinical studies of a drug, it's because it's required by the FDA to get the drug to market. True for both over-the-counter and prescription drugs. And these clinical trials are very expensive. Supplements like turmeric and kratom are not required to undergo prospective clinical studies because of the DSHEA Act of 1994 exempting them. And it's true, once you are worried that a certain supplement can cause serious injury, you cannot do human studies. You're not supposed to do it. For example, so there were no studies of the cardiotoxic effects of fen-phen after it was taken off the market. So, and that's a good example of, there was a lot of litigation, as I'm sure your Honor remembers, about fen-phen. That was approved as an anti-obesity drug after clinical studies in 1986. By 1987, 18 million prescriptions were written, and then there were 150 cases of heart valve disease reported. Many of those resulted in litigation. It was a very rare complication, so it wasn't caught during clinical trials, but I don't think there's any dispute that fen-phen caused those heart valve problems. So I'll go ahead and, if I can, go through how Dr. Dara reached her conclusions. So, John, if you're able to pull up the transcript starting at page 17. And you could, Mr. Kemp looked at a lot of this. She goes through her differential diagnosis. And then she also, if you go to 21 at line 5, she's talking about the things she considered, and then she says that, of course, I considered real water as well in the differential. And she talked about that she ruled it out for Mr. Haley. She also ruled out some other supplements. And out of the 4, which is the most likely? And she says turmeric. That's at line 20. Continuing on to page 22, lines 9 through 25. The question was whether she considered real water. She said she considered it and ruled it out, just like she ruled out a number of other supplements. It's something that I thought about and considered and ruled out. And then the question is, do you believe to, and I'm using Mr. Kemp's words, a reasonable degree of medical certainty that turmeric is the cause of Mr. Haley's injury? And she says yes, that is her opinion. So I'll get back to the difference between turmeric and turmeric supplements, because the literature that plaintiffs cited has to do with turmeric is used in cooking. So I agree that turmeric root, when used in cooking, is safe. There's evidence of that. Dr. Dara is not going to disagree with that. But the problem here is that the literature you saw was about turmeric for cooking, but not supplements. And this is described in the peer review literature. John, if we could pull back up the American Journal of Medicine paper starting at the bottom of the first page in the introduction. So I'm looking at the last sentence. Turmeric is promoted as a dietary, and then unfortunately it continues to the next page. We could get that, John. So it's promoted as a supplement for a variety of conditions, but recently it's been implicated in rare cases, yes, they're rare, of clinically apparent acute liver injury. And then the next paragraph, John. And it says here why. So normally the turmeric root that's used in cooking is not very bioavailable, so it's not absorbed very readily. So what has happened in the supplements is that pepper or piperine has been added to increase bioavailability, so the body absorbs more. And that's the theory upon which the papers say that some of the liver injury is more likely. And I'll show you some other papers that say the same thing. It says, for example, only 20 milligrams of piperine taken with turmeric is reported to increase its bioavailability 20-fold in serum. So this is different than what's in cooking. Dr. Dara tried to explain this in her deposition, 98 and 99, John, of her deposition. And if you could start at line 24 on page 98 through line 20 of page 99. So she's saying the way that they formulate the capsules or the gummy bears or whatever, and Mr. Haley was taking more than just gummy bears. He was taking gummy bears, capsules, several other things. She explains here in much better, much more lucid terms than I could, what they're adding and what they're doing to increase the absorption of turmeric. And that's what's noted in the literature, that when you add these compounds, the doses, the amount that's absorbed is increased, and that's where you see the liver injury. And she acknowledges that's why you're not going to see it with the cooking ingredient. And then she does say, additionally, they found an association with a certain gene mutation, but not in everybody. It was 6 or 7 out of the 10 patients. So there was some genetic variation in the patients that got, that the Dillon found suffered liver injury due to turmeric. Oh, sorry, I thought Mr. Kemp had something to say. I didn't want to interrupt him. And then Dr. Dara also explained in her deposition why you cannot rely on, sorry, let me go back. John, can you pull up the NIH liver tox? I almost forgot this. So the National Institute of Health publishes a book called Liver Tox, where they take all the evidence and literature and determine which supplements, drugs, et cetera, should be included. And of course, acetaminophen's included, but also they go through supplements, and they're deciding what needs to be included and what needs to be cautioned in terms of being hepatotoxic, and turmeric is included. And if you go down to the bottom of page 1 to page 2, there's a discussion about hepatotoxicity. And it's specifically, this is the NIH, talking about why there is a difference between the turmeric used in cooking, that is, as plaintiffs say, safe and effective, and the turmeric that you find in supplements. And it finds that, importantly, means of increasing the bioavailability of curcumin, which is essentially turmeric, were developed using piperin and nanoparticular delivery methods to increase absorption. And that it's these high bioavailability forms that were linked to cases of liver injury. And then it mentions a outbreak that actually occurred in Italy of acute hepatitis. So that's the difference here. And we looked at, or the plaintiffs cited, they didn't pull up, a number of studies, but those were all cooking turmeric, which is a different thing than here.
I'm sorry, Lonnie, can I have Ms. Anderson tell us the date of that report that's on referring to right now?
What report?
What are you referring to right now?
It's the one that's on the screen now.
It's a book published by the National Institute of Health.
I'm familiar with the NIH, but can you tell us the date?
So it looks like it'll be at the top. The date that is last updated will be at the top, but this has been
May 11, 2021.
Another question. Was this document referred to by Dr. Dara? Because I don't believe I saw it in the opposition. That's all I have. Thank you.
I can continue on, ma'am.
Thank you. So then so Dr. Dara, using this information, explains why you can't conclude that turmeric is hepatoprotective. And that is, and she explains that in her deposition. I'm happy to pull it up, but she also, so she references this Dillon paper, which was peer-reviewed. It's in the American Journal of Medicine. And it explains why there haven't previously been many other cases reported of turmeric causing acute liver injury. And John, if we can pull back up the American Journal of Medicine paper. And if you go to page 3, there's a chart. And what they show is that the cases are increasing. The study went up through 2022, but the cases, and again, this is just 6 centers around the country of all the however many hospitals in the country. The cases are increasing as use of turmeric is increasing. That has been a steady increase. So the fact that there were fewer cases in 2009 through 2012, this tracks the increased use of turmeric as a supplement in the country. And then if you go to page 5 in the first full paragraph, again, this study says the same thing. It's been claimed to be beneficial. It has a long history of safe use in traditional medicine, but the increasing popularity over the last 5 years appears to mirror the increase in reported cases collected in the Dillon Perspective study. And that's why when you say it's been used safe and effectively for centuries, it's not only, that's different, it's a different formulation of turmeric, and it's also, there weren't studies done for centuries about the safety. So, but the Dillon paper was not the only literature available. Dr. Dara, in her deposition, talks about there were case reports, there were other reports in the literature, and there's a few of them that we can look at if this peer-reviewed article isn't enough. There's the 2020 British Journal article. Acute liver injury following turmeric use in Tuscany. That's the outbreak that they talked about. This is a peer-reviewed article. There's the 2021 case reports in hepatology and turmeric-induced liver injury. And it actually, in support of this idiosyncrasy, on page 1, I believe it's the first part, John. Idiosyncratic drug-induced liver injury. And it states that turmeric is an idiosyncratic toxin, meaning it's not going to affect everybody who takes it. That's exactly what Dr. Dara said, and that's exactly what this article says that's published in Case Reports in Hepatology. Finally, the 2021 International Medicine.
So tell me, what's the common link? If it doesn't affect everyone, is there a genetic marker? Have they gone that far to determine?
Yeah, so this is touched on in the Dillon paper. I believe it was 6 out of the 10 individuals where there was a causality assessment made had a particular genetic marker, but not all of them. And if I can find it, Dr. Dara talks about it, but they talk about the exact gene. She says on page 99, they found an HLA association, a single nucleotide polymorphism, in 6 or 7 out of the 10 patients, but there's a genetic link pointing to an idiosyncratic kind of relation, and that's exactly what the paper said that she's talking about. And so this peer-reviewed article says it also notes that cases are increasing as the use of turmeric is increasing. And so that's why we're getting more and more of these case reports.
What about levels?
I'm sorry?
Levels of usage.
Correct. And so then, let's see. So then Dr. Dara uses this literature and she does a full assessment about Mr. Haley and sets forth particularized facts. And I think the first thing she notes is that she's not relying on speculation. We know Mr. Haley was using turmeric. We know that his usage was increasing as he got closer to his liver injury. His physician documented that he brought in his supplements, explained what he was taking, and that it was 15 times the daily recommended dose of the supplements, not just of turmeric. And some of the formulations had black pepper, which increases bioavailability. And then she notes that even according to his deposition testimony. So if we believe everything that Mr. Haley said in his deposition, then he wasn't drinking very much real water, particularly in comparison to his turmeric usage that he described to his own doctor. And because of the literature and because of his increasing turmeric use, she opines, and again, that was on page 22, to a reasonable degree of medical cause Mr. Haley's injury. So she does have literature, she meets the criteria for Hall, and she reports her opinion to a reasonable degree of medical probability. And the plaintiffs point to animal studies. She explains in her deposition why animal studies are not relevant, because when you're talking about a gene mutation that is associated with an idiosyncratic reaction, animals don't have the same genes. So it's not something that's going to be replicated in animal studies, even if those animal studies involved the turmeric supplements as opposed to the turmeric roots, which they did not. And then finally, this is the last point as to the turmeric opinion, is that even the plaintiff's expert agrees that turmeric could be contributory towards Mr. Haley's injury. So if we look at Dr. Freeman's report at page 35, and if we go, John, to the Keith Haley and just the first two paragraphs, he cites the same paper that Dr. Dara cites. And he's not doing this in response to Dr. Dara. He found it independently. They both submitted their expert reports on the same day. And he's saying that this is a possible explanation for his hepatitis. And if we go to the next page, John, and then it is my opinion just those top two. It is my opinion that there's evidence to indicate that Haley's hepatitis was most likely due to a combination of factors, one of which was his repeated consumption of real water. So at a minimum, he's saying there's contributory causes and that turmeric may be one of them. So that's turmeric, and I'm happy to answer questions before we move on to kratom.
Yeah, did they indicate what the genetic markers could be potentially?
Yes.
Did they talk about that?
Yeah, they did. Let me. So in the Dillon paper, they do talk about the specific HLA association and the chromosomal abnormality they found. That's the 2020. Well, I marked it as the 2023 paper, John. And if you could scroll through. Oh, wait, no, go back up to the, it's actually in the abstract. So at the very last sentence, so liver injury due to turmeric appears to be increasing in the United States, reflecting usage patterns or an increased combination of black pepper. And turmeric causes potentially severe liver injury that's typically hepatocellular, with a latency of 1 to 4 months and a strong linkage to HLA-B35:01. So that's the gene that they found to be a potential linkage.
Do we know if that gene's present in the plaintiffs in this case?
No, Your Honor, they didn't test for it.
Well, go ahead, ma'am. You can
Sure.
continue on.
So is there any other questions I can answer about turmeric before moving to kratom?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
You're doing good.
And I want to be respectful. I know that
Oh, no, you're
the
doing
staff
good.
has been here for a while. If we need to break, that's fine.
I'll ask you it this way. How much more time do you have?
About the same amount of time for kratom as I did for turmeric.
So we better break, huh? What time do you think, Mr. Marshall?
How about 1:30, Ron?
Everyone enjoy your lunch.
All rise.
Thank you.